Hey everyone, Reed here with Big Strong Book, and today we're talking about Dr. Bloodmoney by Philip K. Dick. This is the second novel that is featured in the second volume of the Library of America series on Philip K. Dick, and this book, all in all, encompasses 5 novels of the 1960s and 70s. Again, this is the second book. And of course, the full title of Dr. Bloodmoney is Dr. Bloodmoney, or How We Got Along After the Bomb, an intentional reference to the great 1964 film Doctor Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb. Uh, Although, interestingly enough, this book was written about a year before the movie Doctor Strangelove came out, and I guess to kind of ride the wave of black comedy that movie put forward. I think it was his publisher, Dick's publisher, whoever was his editor at Ace, or maybe it was Donald Wollheim at Ace, who suggested to use the title Dr. Bloodmoney. And this book deals with an America after a nuclear apocalypse, but in a very, it's hard to say that it's in a humorous way, because it really isn't. Sardonic, sure. Satirical, yes, in that way. Similar in tone to Doctor Strangelove, with maybe a hint more. The word that I'm looking for isn't with a hint more reflection, but there's a little more, or there's a greater hint of gravity, I think, with Dr. Bloodmoney, as opposed to the film Doctor Strangelove, which is great in its own right. But with Dr. Bloodmoney, the scene, pretty much this entire novel is set in California, as I suppose many of Dick's novels are. And it concerns a world where there is this man, this scientist, who, when his name in English, it translates to Dr. Bloodmoney, but I'm just going to look back in the book just to make sure I got his name absolutely correct. Yes, it is. His name is Dr. Bluthgeld, which in German translates to, or it translates in English into blood money. And they mention that about 10 years before the book begins, there was a nuclear accident, and radiation got into the atmosphere in the world and caused all these weird mutations. And so Bluthgeld is blamed for these things. And as a result, there's almost this kind of, and even characters call it, a schizophrenic personality that results, and he thinks his name is Jack Tree, or it's almost like an identity he assumes, because he feels like people are always out to get him because he caused this big accident to happen. And as the scene is being set, we're introduced to this character named Hoppy Harrington, who has no arms or legs, but has these extenders that allow him, and a thing called either a mobile, whatever you want to call it, that he propels himself with. But he is a TV repairman, or he starts as a TV repairman as the novel begins. And early on in the novel, a nuclear war happens, and then the novel jumps ahead about 7 years, and then we're visiting with a lot of these characters. It's a big ensemble cast of characters for this book. We're visiting them all 7 years into this apocalypse. And when I think of great post-apocalyptic fiction, I personally think of The Road. The Road is by Cormac McCarthy, is one of my favorite books. And that is one that is so bleak, and it's so dour and dark. Whereas this, there's it's almost funny to see the humans that are left try to still form societies, and they're still trying to have school for their children and do all of these things, and they're burying everything. And characters mention that it's kind of strange for them to feel this way when they just all went through hell, and they're having to pick up the pieces. And even though it's clear that they can't go back to the past, they're all still trying to do that. It's there's a sheen of like a normal society, or if you want to call it a normal capitalist society, but it's about kind of all of these characters trying to wrap their minds around their identity and their capabilities. There's this character who we start the novel kind of from his name is Stuart. I'm just trying to Stuart McConchie, works at the TV shop, and then after the war, he makes these like animal traps, and he doesn't want to do that. And he's like, is this it? As he was kind of thinking in the TV store, like, is this it? Is this my life? And he's stuck doing similar stuff after an apocalypse, thinking that it would change him completely. And in the midst of all of this, before the war, there is a man named Dangerfield, and if I can, again, there's so many. Walter Dangerfield, yes, and his wife are set to go off to Mars and be the first people to fly off to Mars. And well, something happens to them, and just as the bombs begin to fall, they get stuck in an orbit around the Earth as a satellite, and then Walter Dangerfield's wife dies. And so in the post-apocalyptic landscape, Walter Dangerfield is left to broadcast. He's essentially the DJ, the radio host of Earth after millions, if not billions, of people have died, having to play the role of DJ, and he reads the book of Human Bondage by Somerset Maugham. He reads that. Again, plays music, and he's constantly in pain, and he's not sure what this pain is, and he realizes that there's only a finite amount of time that he can be up here, and everybody is rallying around radio signals that get to his ship, because it's in some ways like when a traumatic thing happens, in world event, in personal lives or world events, escapism in a way, or at least a thing with great regularity, and something that reminds you of the past. Whether it doesn't have to be so clearly a nostalgia trip, but as Walter Dangerfield is kind of having these radio broadcasts as his satellite keeps going around and around, for the whole communities gather around these radios just to hear him read of Human Bondage for the 20th time, because of course Dangerfield has a finite amount of music tapes and books that he brought with him when he was hoping to colonize Mars, and he can't. And in the midst of all of this, there is the character Hoppy Harrington. There's an exact term for it, and I'm forgetting that off the top of my head. If I can find it here, maybe. But he is wanting, Hoppy is wanting to take over um, the radio waves, in a sense. Um, and he's the closest that this book gets to an antagonist. I think he's one of the main people that realizes the power of imitation and the power that Dangerfield holds as he goes around and around the world. And that's something that Hoppy wants to harness and potentially take over. So Hoppy realizes the power that identity holds. You get characters, even like there's a character, Bonnie Keller, who she doesn't know if she wants to live out in the countryside, and she doesn't, essentially, she doesn't know if she's happy in her marriage, and she has a bunch of affairs, and so there's that kind of, that more melodramatic line that you can see all throughout fiction, wanting to know if she's better in the city or in the rural life, but it's all tied into dealing with the traumatic event of nuclear holocaust. And then she has a daughter named Edie Keller, who has a brother who's like a fetus that's within her, but like a brother who can speak and speak to her, but it's still like the brother is within her, and I mean, if you've read anything by Dick, things like that, elements where, yeah, there's a character trapped inside of another character and they're trying to get out, and nobody understands it, and then he tries to find ways to sync animals up to him so he can become the animals. Not unlike anything we've definitely seen things like that in plenty of Dick novels before. But you get, and that Edie's brother's name is Bill, and of course he's trying to figure out things too, and that's kind of the funny part of it. That's the absurd part of it. You just, and for some people, it could definitely go off the rails. I don't want to act like this is a new thing. Like, identity is clearly a theme within this book. It's a theme in all of his stuff. And I wonder if Dick is trying to tap into, I mean, obviously when he wrote this, okay, 1963, you were coming off the Cuban Missile Crisis the previous year, 1962. A lot of fear, and you almost wonder, and I know that I haven't read his book, A Maze of Death, which I know kind of taps into what Freud called or how Freud termed the death drive that humans have. The kind of, you're hurtling towards death, you're almost seeking this self-destruction. And it makes sense that Dick would write a novel like this. I mean, I'm sure everybody in the early 60s, they were preoccupied with this. And I wonder if there was a little bit there was a little bit out there of people romanticizing or idealizing that with a nuclear holocaust, all of humanity's problems would go away, and that, we could shape things together and be better. And essentially what Dick's saying is that no matter whatever happens to humans, we're going to be up to the same old shit as before, and nothing can change that. And he does so in a very funny way. And again, that's where this book kind of treads the line between satire and black comedy. And I mean, it is all of those things. It's satire, black comedy. It's also dark too, as all of his work is in some aspect. There's a little bit of darkness there. And it's hard to know I mean, I know I liked reading this. It's just, it's one of his ones that when you put the book down, you're still a little puzzled by it. And that's definitely how I feel about this. I feel still a little puzzled. And yeah, I mean, I enjoyed reading it. It's just, it's hard to know what to make of it. I mean, I would recommend this, just not for somebody as their first Philip K. Dick novel. Now, I mean, I've been thinking, I'm like, okay, how many of his novels have I read by now? And I think I've read almost 10 of his novels. There's one. There's the big one that I have not read yet is Valis. I have not read Valis yet. Valis, however you say it. I have not read that yet. I will probably read that next. And I know enough about Dick's biography and his personal life to kind of go into Valis knowing a little bit about what he's going to talk about. I've read some of his writings from the 70s, his more autobiographical stuff. I haven't read the exegesis or anything, but I've seen some speeches that he made in the 70s, and yeah, he I mean, that'll be an interesting thing to experience. But yeah, like this, I mean, it's identity. Dick is always preoccupied with identity. And I suppose you could say that for all authors for some reason or another, but this was especially prevalent. We know what our identity is in society, but when you take that away, even if a society may exist in an apocalyptic fashion, you're almost wanting a complete change, but you don't always necessarily get that. And you're kind of wanting things to be back the way they were, but then you're left with the same fears as before, but yet you still kind of have a new set of fears now. It's just, it just goes to illustrate, I guess, the zero-sum games with all of these. And yeah, maybe a year or two from now, a reread of this will offer me, and maybe a slower read through of it, because I read through this in a few days kind of quickly, that a reread I'll get something else to take away from it. Again, I don't know what people usually take away from Dr. Bloodmoney. I have no idea. So I could be completely off the mark in what I'm getting and how I'm feeling with this. I mean, it's, his novels like Ubik and Three Stigmata are very bizarre, but through those you kind of weather a roller coaster throughout, and that's what you expect. And for this, it turns into a roller coaster at the end. And I know I'll still be thinking about this for a long time, the things within this novel, the implications of it, and some imagery things towards the end, especially. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I mean, that's about all I can say about it. So, Dr. Bloodmoney gets a recommendation for me. And I think I've said this before on the channel, but if you don't have these Library of America editions of his books, I would highly recommend getting them. They're not too expensive, and it's a great way to kind of get a good survey of his greatest works. Yeah, again, Dr. Bloodmoney gets a recommendation from me. Next to come, most likely, Valis. So, if this was, I don't know, on the borderline of being palatable for me, who knows what Valis will bring? Who the hell knows? Dick knows. So, all right, I will see you guys next time.